And I guess next on the list is me, and I'll go into another one that was sort of on the list, but might have been a little bit more memes called Liar Liar. So this is a
Is
series
that your
done
favorite
by
movie, Spire?
yeah. I, I'm, so we need to provide before the podcast. We need to give pictures of each series to Dark so he can put them on the stream, right? Show which series we're talking about so far and so on. And I searched like just liar liar, right?
You fool.
Yeah. So when I searched it, I immediately got at least half a page plus of the movie starring Jim Carrey, and I was like, I forgot, God, I forgot. So I just like had to search like liar liar anime, but it was pretty funny. It was a little bit funny
What's your
overlap.
Spire? What's your favorite Jim Carrey movie?
I
Sonic. You
feel
can't
like
count. You can't count Sonic. It has to be actual Jim Carrey.
yeah, no, I won't.
Jim Carrey, the character.
Yeah.
I would say the thing is like there are a bunch of so it's like I don't really have a favorite movie where I'm like, wow, Jim Carrey did like so well in this, except for The Mask, I guess. But it's
Look
like
at
I
this.
do.
Look, how dare you say that about the Truman Show?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna
Truman
say the
Show
same
is
thing.
killer,
Oh, yeah,
dude.
all
Truman
right,
Yeah,
Show is
dude.
just
Come
like
on.
that's true.
Eternal
I
Sunshine?
think
Yeah, man. What's wrong
the
with
thing
you?
is, I always like the Truman Show
21,
is a classic, but I
or
always
no, it's
forget
Shut
it.
up.
23. Was it 23 or
I think it's.
21? I think
Batman
it's
I don't,
23.
Forever
I don't
as
remember.
Jim Carrey as the Riddler? How dare you?
The funny thing is, I know Truman Show is like the classic, but I like whenever
Why does
somebody
this
mentions
not
like,
have
okay, Jim Carrey movies, go. I always remember The Mask and The Grinch over Truman Show, and I don't know why. But those two kind of just like pop up into
Mr.
my brain
Popper's
more.
Penguins? Flubber, but with Robin Williams instead of
I
Jim
always
Carrey?
remember the shitty ones like Bruce Almighty stuff as well,
Hey, hey,
instead of
I
like
like.
Ace
Hey,
Bruce
hey,
Ventura.
Almighty
hey,
is
hey!
not shitty,
How
dude.
dare you say Bruce
Okay,
It's
you're
Almighty?
playing
okay.
your hand.
Okay, dude.
Bruce Almighty
Bruce
is
Evan,
Almighty is not a good movie.
Evan Almighty's
yeah,
the
Bruce
bad one,
Almighty.
man. Bruce Almighty's the good
Bruce
one.
Almighty was
How dare you?
fine.
It's
All right.
Had some good
I mean,
bits.
Evan Almighty had Steve Carell, but like,
it's
come on, he
it's
can't.
a fun movie, but it's not a good movie.
It's a fun movie. I think it's a movie. But yeah, anyways, I always forget his like classic stuff, and I always remember like the stupid stuff.
Mine's Ace Ventura easily.
Ace Ventura
Ace
is also
Ventura and the
classic. Yeah,
Mask,
exactly.
classics.
Ace Ventura, very
Yes, sir.
good.
Hey man,
Um,
Batman Forever. He made a really
Honestly,
good
I don't
Bill
really
Riddler.
Kramer.
remember it that much. Like Liar Liar is a fine like movie, like a fine family movie. It's not.
Yeah.
I feel like Liar Liar is probably one of the weakest. Like
Yeah.
Anyways, that was neither here nor there with regards to the actual anime Liar
I think it's
Liar.
really relevant. I think it's
It was fire. How dare you?
We just have to get it out of the room. We have to make sure that we know that Jim Carrey is not in this anime. Just have to
Jim
get that
Carrey
out.
is a fantastic actor. Did you see
yeah,
his
and
real
he
life
should have
face?
been.
Oh yeah.
Should
Yeah.
have been in
Yeah.
this anime. Better.
But anyways, I wish he had dubbed one of the characters. That would have been pretty great. But anyways, this is a series done by Geek Toys. Geek Toys have done a lot of kind of like smaller stuff more recently. Obviously they've done a lot of in between stuff as well in the I want to say past 5 to 7 years or so, maybe a little bit more. Um, but recently they did helped with the most recent Data Live, I believe, Data Live 5, right? As well as Data Bullet movies. They did Adventurers Who Don't Believe in Humanity Will Save the World. That was a recent sort of like isekai kind of, not isekai, but like isekai like kind of thing. Hensuki, they did Kandaga Jet Girls. They did
Wow.
Plunder, which is not that good, or Read Righted. So they had like some misses, but it
They
is what
did
it is.
Dead One Death Play as well, I believe.
Oh, okay, okay. So yeah, I think overall their audio visuals or their staff is pretty solid, and they use most of, um, I think, their directors as well as sort of like the major kind of staff, the episode director, the art director, and stuff like that. Um, most of like the major players are from uh Geek Toys, but then like everybody kind of every like the majority of the animation casts are from the subcontractors. I think it's a Korean subcontractor called Namu Animation, and they have like a bunch of Korean animators from there as well. So they borrow a couple of subcontractors, mainly again animation, borrowing from Namu Animation, but for the most part, they do like uh, the veterans. The major players are all kind of veterans from Geek Toys, and the audiovisuals are pretty decent for what it is. I think the animations, the character designs themselves, and the general artwork is pretty standard to almost slightly above average in terms of like a general rom com, harem kind of just battle academy kind of series. And the actual frames and the fight scenes pan out pretty decently for what it is. It was above average because usually I would expect a lot less or a lot of just like, oh, this is a PowerPoint kind of thing for these sorts of series. But I was pleasantly surprised at how smoothly the animation and the fight scenes turned out to be. So pretty good. The OP the I wasn't too impressed by the general OST, but the OPED was decent if I remember correctly. Yeah. Or so the ending theme by the cast members by I guess the harem, right? And then the story Fakey Mary Game by Smile Princess. I believe that's sung by the cast members or something like that. Yeah, I think it's probably like sung by the. No, okay, never mind. It's actually sung by the idol people, so like an idol group called Smile Princess. But yeah, I wasn't too hung up on it or anything, or wasn't really too impressed by it. The opening is Lies Goes On by Main, who this opening is a very main opening. If you've heard of other main openings, you sort of know what I'm talking about. This opening is the most main thing that Maine has ever made. uh, it's yeah, I don't know how to describe it otherwise. It's a very like 2010s Nico like techno like I'm gonna be main kind of thing. So I wasn't too again. It was nice to listen for me personally, but on a more objective sense, I wouldn't be like, wow, this was a freaking masterpiece. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
it is what it is. Um, but solid in that sense if you want to listen to it. Um, Going straight on into the story a little bit, I believe this is a sorry, no, it's a light novel adaptation. So light novel adaptation, and what it is you're in a battle academy. The name doesn't matter. It's like Academy Island, and then there's all of these, sorts of like Japanese names or whatever. That's not important. Um, they in this battle academy, people play each other in games. You can have like it doesn't necessarily have to be 1v1. It can be like multiple people and like multiple groups and stuff like that. And they battle each other. They battle in games to win stars from each other. So if you win, you take the stars of your opponent, vice versa. And if you get enough stars, you become the prestigious sort of 7 star. There's only supposed to be like one person who can earn these like 7 stars, and most of the other sort of like tough opponents are called like 5 stars or 6 stars or whatever. Or if they have like colors, it's the red star, the indigo star, or whatever it is, right? Stuff like that. So the main character, he's like he's essentially a nobody. He has no stars. He's a newcomer to the academy. He accidentally beats this red-haired girl who is initially a tsundere called Sarasa, I believe, or she calls herself Sarasa, um, Sarasa Sayonji, and takes her star and finds out that she's actually not the person she um, professed to be, and that he she was supposed to be sort of like the 7-star representative, but then now he, after beating her, has to sort of take on that mantle and pretend to be the 7-star when he's not really, and take on all newcomers at the academy. Essentially, the lore kind of railroads him into this state where like he has to defeat all newcomers and like kind of not get screwed over and stay at the academy, by playing games against all these like strong opponents that come up, have actually earned these stars. Whereas he's just like a newcomer who accidentally beat the other red haired girl, and now he has to pretend like, oh, I'm the strongest in the academy. Everybody come at me. And he has to use, his wits. He has to use the resources at hand because the academy is willing to help him, kind of trick people. And he also had the academy also provided him with a maid called Shirayuki Himeji, or sorry, Himeji Shirayuki, who is very smart and very like capable and like knows how to like plan out stuff for the games and stuff like that, and who is willing to help him as well. So the general plot of the story kind of progresses in that there's sort of there is an underlying plot about how the red haired girl Sayoji Sarasa isn't actually Sarasa. She's supposed to sort of be like a fake, a body double, um, who is standing in for the real Sayonji, who has been kidnapped, and then that's sort of like a deeper plot about the academy and all this crap later on. That's again not very important, and not I'm not too bothered about not knowing about that, to be honest, because that's all that sort of same crap you usually see in animes. But the important part is how there are these sorts of mini arcs in the anime that are contained around beating opponents, beating certain students in the academy. New opponents rise up, and the three have to kind of rack their brains, or yeah, the three, the main guy, the red hair girl, and the maid, have to all rack their brains to figure out how do we beat this guy in this game, um, while using tricks, wordplay, and like mind games, and all this sort of stuff to beat the opponent. So because so what also happens in this game is that like the more stars and like stuff like that you have, the more sort of abilities you gain, and these abilities are like literally stuff like like disguise XYZ thing, or like whatever, and they're actual like powers in the game that can take effect in the game, or like you can like tell a lie about whatever, blah blah blah. And since he doesn't have these powers, right, he needs to he needs to kind of lie again about what he did, right? He can't just be like the academy just hired a good really smart maid, and use the drone to spy on you, and that's how I won. He needs to lie about the abilities that he doesn't have, and make up this like cool story about how he's a 7-star and he's the top of the academy and did all these cool abilities and tricks to beat the opponent. So that's sort of how this pans out, and again, that's sort of the main thing over any explanation of the game or the lore or whatever the other crap is. But other than that, I think there's not too much to it. I The way I feel about this thing
So
is like
does he actually like cheat or not?
um there's not yes, he essentially like, does cheat, because the idea is like there's a sort of usually a lot of times, like sometimes there's um how do I say it? Some he doesn't cheat in every game, but like for instance some of the earlier stuff where he gets help from the academy, so it's like he's getting help from like an outside player during the actual game, right, when it's supposed to be a 1v1 kind of thing. um that is um a thing that does happen.
but a lot
Right.
of times also it's more just like he and the maid and the red haired girl kind of plan out a lot of the stuff beforehand. Like this is gonna happen. We should do this, and then we should do that. If you run to this room and then get this sort of card, a lot of this is sort of a lot of the games are based around like card games, and like tabletop kind of game kind of stuff.
Sure.
Um, so
So is it
it's
more like one of
a
those
lot of it's
series
like
that's like
planning
a
out.
setup and then payoff type thing? Like, do they do like the rundown essentially, like not
Yeah,
really
it's
like
a
a
setup and
heist,
payoff,
but
but it's like they don't show it as in with most stories slash anime, they don't show necessarily 100% of the thought processes and full details beforehand. So then when the opponent gets caught in the final trap and he's like, what? My phone, it says something else or whatever it is. And then and only then will the MC be like, ha, that's because I did blah 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 blah. And the audience will be like, oh, okay, you didn't really tell me about that, but sure, I guess. So it's like that sort of series. But I I think the audio visuals are nice, and it kind of like stuck out to me because usually the audio visuals are much more mediocre in these sorts of series. But I'm glad it got enough money to get this sort of stuff going. Um, as for the story, the issue is all of the character interactions and just like the general character setups, really, of the game or of the series are just not good. It's just not good. It's either it devolves into very not even standard, like below average rom-com dialogue, or the whole, like, oh, I can't let you get out of the academy. I can't let you get kicked out of the academy like this. We're all here to you're here because you work so hard. I can't let somebody like that just leave. You know, fucking lines like that, right? And
Right.
the usual. Um, and beyond that, I'm not really impressed by any of the lore details at all. Um, Nothing that I haven't seen before really. Uh the games and whatever are like nice and the trickery's good, but feel like I feel like even having like the small like the detailed explanations and like having them, outwit the opponent and doing that, it's nice, but gets dragged down too much by the rest of the series not holding up, which is kind of weird for me to say because I said at the very beginning of this review, oh, this isn't important. Like the lore isn't important, the game setup isn't important, whatever, this, that, and the other isn't important. But the other side of that coin is that if you don't take care of anything except for the actual solution to the game, right? And like
Yeah.
a slight game rule, it really does kind of stand out because you have this sort of like not a high point, but like a decent like point where you're going through the game and the characters are like, oh, we should do this and that and the other. Um, and they solve and or not solve, but defeat the opponent, right, with their wits. And that's nice. But then immediately after that ends, the rest of it is at best below average, and at worst pretty garbage. So uh, I just feel like it just gets dragged down by the pretty irrelevant and not very good lore, the pretty terrible character stuff, and just interactions in general, like personality setups and interactions in general. Um, I'm not like super impressed by the setups of the game. It's not and it's just I don't know, man. Other than like the one good point about this series, a lot of it kind of goes by the wayside, I think, from what the author does. And while I do respect the author for thinking out these more like intricate scenes, I'm not, a series needs to be complete. It needs to uh, sure, it needs to do well what it's got with what it's got, but it also needs to at least be afloat on the other sort of parts of the story, the sort of interpersonal interactions part of the story, the slight kind of lore slash dramatization slash catharsis part of the story. It needs to stay afloat slightly on that stuff, or at least render it completely irrelevant. And it hasn't done either. And again, it just drags down the series too much because those parts are not good, and the contrast in quality really shows up um when the game portion of it ends. So I think if I had to rate this series on like a Mal list or Mal ranking or whatever, I would probably give it. Hmm. I'll probably give it a 4, maybe even lower. I would maybe give it a 3, just because the game, the mini arcs are nice, but it's just too much. I'm firmly of the opinion that if you I'm firmly of the opinion that a lot of these anime series, especially stuff that have underlying lore, especially stuff that have something like a rom-com or whatever elements to it, the core needs to be the character. The core needs to be the characters, like lore and like where they come from, and not lore, but like how they interact with, right? The social aspect of the world, the personal relationships that form this sort of story, anime, whatever, um, need to come a little bit first, or need to be pretty solid before you make the rest of the game or the gimmick or the crafting or whatever else solid. And it simply failed. This series simply fails to deliver on that aspect. And so, even though the game aspect is pretty nice, I would have to give it a pretty bad score just on that sort of point alone. I think, you have to make solid characters. You have to make solid interaction. Um, you can't just have very below average rom-com drivel and have that be littered out all across your backyard and your front yard, and then be like, hey, but the game part is nice. That's not gonna work with sorry. So I have to give it a pretty low score, 3 out of 10. The audio visuals are decent. The game part is decent, but it's just too much dragging it down. Too much. That's sort of all I have to say about it. There's not too much because, again, most of the value, quote unquote, that you gain from the series is kind of watching these game mini arcs pan out. All the other lore, whatever stuff, pretty painful to watch. It is what it is. But yeah, that was my review of Liar Liar, not the Jim Carrey movie, the anime, light novel adaptation done by Geek Toys, and I believe again most of their major player like top kind of staff are, I think, from previous anime that they've done, or like are probably within the studio, whatever. But they have contracted out to a couple of other subcontractors, namely Namu Animation, and the audio visuals still turned out pretty good. If you want to watch a little bit of like the intricate kind of game back and forth Battle Academy kind of series, I guess check this out. But I wouldn't really recommend it overall. Yeah, that was my review of Liar Liar.